Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really interesting puzzle right at the heart of our economy. Why would a bank, whose entire business is lending money, suddenly decide to pump the brakes, even when things are going great?
I mean, think about it. It seems totally backwards, doesn't it? You've got tons of people who want loans, and almost everyone is paying them back on time. You'd think banks would be in overdrive, lending out as much as they possibly can, but often they don't. And the reason why is actually fundamental to understanding how our entire financial system stays safe. All right, so to crack this puzzle, we've got to start with a really crucial idea. For a bank, not all losses are created equal. There are the everyday, predictable bumps in the road, and then there are the sudden, catastrophic shocks that can change everything in an instant. Okay, first up we have what's called expected loss. You can just think of this as a normal, everyday cost of doing business. You know, a bank lends out a ton of money, and it fully expects that a small, predictable number of those loans won't get paid back. It's not a surprise. It's baked right into their business model, kind of like how a grocery store knows some of its fruit will go bad. It's routine.
But then you've got the big one, unexpected loss. Now this is the stuff of nightmares for bankers and regulators. We're not talking about a few routine defaults anymore. This is a massive, system-wide wave of defaults that can hit during a major financial crisis. It's that super rare but incredibly dangerous event that could literally put a bank out of business.
And you can really see the difference here. On the left, that's your expected loss. See how it just kind of bounces around a predictable average? Manageable. But on the right, that long, skinny part of the graph, that's the tail. That's the unexpected loss. It's that low probability catastrophic event that everyone is trying to guard against.
So it makes sense, right? If you're facing two totally different kinds of risk, you're going to need two totally different kinds of defense. And that's exactly how this system is set up. Banks have a two-part defense system.
And this lays it out pretty clearly. For all those frequent, predictable, expected losses, banks use something called provisions. Just think of that as setting aside money from their earnings, like a regular operating expense. But for those rare, catastrophic, unexpected losses, that's where capital comes in. Capital is the bank's ultimate war chest, its life-saving shock absorber for when things go really, really wrong.
And this is the part that is absolutely critical to understand. Using provisions is normal. It happens all the time. But if a bank has to dip into its capital to cover losses, that's a massive red flag. That means something has gone seriously wrong. Capital is all about survival. If that gets hit, the bank's very existence is on the line.
So who decides how big this all-important safety net has to be? Well, it's not up to the banks. The rules come from a huge, complex set of global regulations you may have heard of, the Basel Accords.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. This chart looks incredibly complicated. But don't worry, you don't need to be an expert on every little box. The whole point of this massive, sprawling framework boils down to one simple, powerful idea. Force banks to hold enough capital to survive those major, unexpected economic shocks.
And here's why this matters so much. These rules aren't really just about protecting the banks. They're about protecting you. They exist to make sure your deposits are safe and to prevent one bank's failure from starting a domino effect that takes down the entire economy.
Okay, you ready? This is the aha moment. This is where all these pieces, expected loss, unexpected loss, capital, and regulations all click together and solve the puzzle we started with.
The key concept here is something called risk-weighted assets, or RWA for short. Here's how to think about it. A bank's capital is a finite resource, like a budget. Every loan it makes costs a certain amount of that capital budget. A super safe loan, say to a stable government, might only use up a tiny sliver of the budget. But a much riskier loan, like to a brand new company, gets a higher risk weight, which means it costs a much bigger chunk of that precious capital.
And there it is. This is the whole puzzle solved. Let's walk it through. A bank is looking at a high-risk loan that could pay out big time. But the Basel rules say, hey, that loan is risky, so it gets a high risk weight. That means making that one loan eats up a huge piece of the bank's capital pie. And suddenly, the bank has way less capital left over to make other, safer loans. The risky loan isn't just risky, it's expensive from a capital perspective.
So all this talk about risk weights and capital ratios, what does it actually mean for you, for your money, for your life? Let's bring it all home.
At the end of the day, all these complicated rules are about one thing: stability. That big pile of capital that banks are forced to hold, it's a giant shock absorber for the entire economy. It's what makes sure your bank can actually survive a really bad recession, and it's what ultimately protects the money that you've trusted them with.
And this really gets at the fundamental tension at play here. You have this constant tug of war. On one side, you've got the bank, which exists to make a profit by lending out money. On the other side, you have the regulator, whose job is to make sure the bank doesn't take on so much risk that it blows up in a crisis. The capital rules are the battleground where those two forces meet.
So we've solved our puzzle. Banks can't always lend as much as they want to because every loan, especially the risky ones, comes with a capital cost. The whole system is designed to keep us safe, but it leaves us with a really big, nagging question. Does it also make banks too cautious? Does it hold back lending and slow down economic growth? Finding that perfect razor's edge balance between safety and growth, well, that's the billion-dollar question that everyone in finance is still trying to answer.